To begin our day, I'd like to welcome our school chaplain, the Reverend John Cornish, to the microphone to lead us in our school prayer, followed by Mr. Chris Tachek to give an acknowledgement of country, and Mr. Muldoon to officially launch our conference. Thanks.
Before we do our school prayer, I'd like to ask you to close your eyes. I'll give you a brief reflection from Meister Eckhart, a German theologian from the 13th century, and this one's about work. The outward work will never be puny if the inward work is great, and the outward work can never be great or even good if the inward one is puny or of little worth. The inward work invariably includes in itself all expansiveness, all breadth, all length, all depth. Such a work receives and draws all its being from nowhere except from and in the heart of God. Let us now together say the school prayer. Loving God, whose Son Jesus is the light of the gospel, we pray that each day we may show thankfulness for your love and many good things you give us. May we eagerly serve one another, be patient with our sisters and brothers, and show your love as we live and learn together. Bless our school and community, students, parents, staff, and council, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Good morning, everyone. If I could continue with John's theme and ask you to ground yourself to this space and to this place by closing your eyes, and even our online guests to do the same as well. I'm just going to give an acknowledgement of country, and I've been given permission to share a little bit of language with you this morning. So on behalf of our heads of school, staff, parents and carers, it's the student body of St. Columba Anglican School, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Biripi people, the Biripi language group. We acknowledge their continued connection and custodianship of land, sea and sky. We recognise that their sovereignty was never ceded, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present and future, and extend this respect to any other First Nations people present here today, for they hold the memories, traditions, culture and hopes of Aboriginal Australia. And in Gatang, Yi Biripi Barai, this is Biripi country. Gatai, Nirian, Wakura, let us go together as one. Marambu, thank you.
Good morning and welcome. St. Columba unashamedly aims to be the most outstanding school in New South Wales. While our exploits on the stage and sports field add to our educational offerings and our reputation, it is our core business of teaching and learning that will deliver our reputation and our ambition. We, as a school, acknowledge that what has been successful in education in the past will not guarantee success in the future. Schools doing what has always been done will no longer be enough to serve the current and future needs of our students. Our educational approach must evolve as the world has evolved. We must seek out the best in 21st century teaching and learning so that we can truly be the best. And we believe that we have a duty to share what we have learned with our collaborators in education if we are to live up to the expectations that we set for ourselves. Today, we welcome you, parents, staff and guests, to another step in that process. We hope that bringing together what industry would call the stakeholders in our educational design will illuminate and enhance what we've already done and provide a look into our future. We thank you for your interest and presence in what will, no doubt, be an interesting and even challenging conference. In opening this conference, I will leave you with one of my favourite quotes on life that seems so very apt at this gathering. For things to stay the same, everything must change. The future, let's bring it on.
Thank you, Terry. Usually by 8:51 on a Thursday, I've told someone to put their phone away. So just a reminder, if you could put yours on silent, perhaps. or put it in your locker. Well, good morning. For those that I haven't met before, my name's Chris Delaney and I'm the Director of Professional Learning here at St. Columba. It is my privilege this morning to welcome you and thank both the parents who are with us here in the room and our colleagues from Bishop Druitt and those visitors from across New South Wales and further afield that are joining us on Zoom. It's great to have you with you. It's great to have you with us. 4.5 years ago, alongside our colleagues at the New South Wales Association of Independent Schools, St. Columba joined a global movement of educators who share a lofty and exciting vision for what education should look like, in which all learners should flourish, in which all learners should be able to contribute to the common good within the community that they live, in which all learners are good at learning and good at life. Here at St. Columba, we're part of something much bigger than ourselves. The New Pedagogies for Deep Learning movement is a global one. I think the map's up there. You can see over 20 countries, 3,000 schools, 25,000 teachers, perhaps 1 million students are working in this space of deep learning. And I note that Max Drummy, the Asia Pacific deep learning mentor, who we spend a little bit of time with, I think he's tuned in online as well. So I thank him for the map which he sent me yesterday. This is a big movement and we're super excited to be part of it. This morning, we want to share with you some of the journey that we've been on. So thank you for taking the time to join us. But before I get into that, I just want to take a moment. I think it's timely just to mention Terry very briefly. After 15 years, Terry will retire as the principal of St. Columba Anglican School in just a couple of weeks. And I think it's fair to say that we wouldn't be meeting like this today if it wasn't for Terry's vision, leadership, and commitment to continually improving the experience and the opportunities that St. Columba provides. Terry's not a man who sits back and is happily to simply maintain a status quo. I can hear a few chuckles. In fact, one of his favourite sayings is good is the enemy of great. So Terry, thank you for poking and prodding, or should I say encouraging us to continually improve what we offer here at St. Columba, because I know for you, it's always for the benefit of the students, and that's a really worthwhile thing to pursue. So thank you, Terry. And I think a little round of applause at this point might be suitable. All right, so deep learning. To be clear, it's not a project or an initiative or a fad here today, gone tomorrow. It's actually about culture. It's a culture that is part of everything we do. And so you'll see deep learning in classrooms. You'll see it on the sports field, in the workshop, on this stage if you were here last night. You'll see it in the interactions in the playground between the students. You'll hear it in conversations between the teachers. It's a culture that says this is what good learning looks like. It's a culture that makes a promise to every young person who attends our school. It's a belief that says, we know you are more than a mark or a grade or an ATAR. And it's an acknowledgement that the traditional model of schooling measured in high stakes testing has not worked for all students. I want you to think about your own school experience for a moment. Was your teacher the fountain of all knowledge in the classroom? Were you asked to sit quietly and take notes? Was there energy and joy in your classroom? Was there choice? Did you have a voice in your own learning? Would you describe the learning as being connected to the real world and being meaningful? I wonder when you went to school, what sort of outcomes you were measured against. Teachers love outcomes, don't we? I don't love them that much. And in fact, I can honestly say that in my 20 years of schooling, Sorry, 20 years of being a teacher. I wasn't at school that long. 19. In my 20 years as a teacher, this is the first set of outcomes that I've actually been excited to work with. These are the outcomes of deep learning. We refer to them as the 6 Cs. We talk about them a lot. Parents, perhaps in the room here today, you've heard your son or daughter talking about the 6 Cs at home. I hope so. That's exactly what we want to be happening. The 6 Cs, sometimes in my home, are referred to, the 6 Cs. That's teenagers for you. But at least they're hearing what we value. And that's important. In fact, we don't just talk about them. We use these deep learning progressions to help young people understand their strengths and their areas for growth. These progressions have given us a common language around which we can talk, and we can talk about learning that sticks. We believe these outcomes, or the 6 Cs, are the outcomes that will stick with a young person for the rest of their life. We also know that these outcomes or capabilities are in high demand within the workforce, both currently and probably more so in the future. And it's not just St. Columba and employers and 3,000 or so schools across the globe talking about the 6 Cs. A little later today, parents, you'll have the opportunity to hear more about a research partnership that we are involved with. In 2021, the University of Melbourne selected 30 first mover schools, that's their language, not ours, from across Australia who are helping the university to determine, is it possible to reliably credential young people within these capabilities? Is it possible to measure in a reliable way, in a trustworthy way, how well a student collaborates, how well they think critically, how they communicate? This is groundbreaking research. And just last week, we were in Melbourne to hear some really exciting developments in this area. And so parents, just after morning tea, you'll be able to hear a little bit more about that. It's pretty exciting stuff. So I encourage you to hang around for the parent forum if you can. So this is all really exciting work. But we haven't even spoken about the real reason why we think deep learning is good for young people. We strongly believe that good learning that is purposeful and meaningful, in which students have a voice, in which they can collaborate with others, solve real-world issues, we believe that sort of learning is good for a young person's well-being. And to help us unpack this further, I'm really excited to introduce you to our friend, Dr. Jean Clinton. We might be able to transfer over to Jean live on the Zoom now. Jean is a clinical professor within the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioural Neurosciences at McMaster University in Canada. Dr. Clinton has previously been an education advisor to the Premier of Ontario and the Minister of Education, and for over 35 years, she's been a consultant to children and youth mental health programs and welfare services. Her special interest lies within brain development and the crucial role that relationships, belonging, and connectedness play in a young person's life. We've had the fortune of hearing Jean present at a number of deep learning events, and she works closely with Michael Fullen and the New Pedagogies team. When Jean's not talking to us and others about the well-being of young people, she enjoys being a grandmother to her grandchildren and singing with them. And I'm interested to know, Jean, what it is that you like to sing with your grandchildren. Her grandchildren note that Jean, Nana, make her laugh. That Nana makes them laugh. And Jean, we're not going to ask you to sing this morning, but I know that you'll make us laugh, and we're really, really glad that you're with us. Which songs do you sing with your grandchildren?
So I'm so excited to be here. So my beauteous child who lives in Yukon, she loves me to sing, I want someone to buy me a pony, Jake Jog, jog, jigga jog, gee. And then my boys here in Ontario love for me to sing them a song that I used to sing when I was a preschool toddler myself. And it was sugar in the morning, sugar in the evening, sugar at supper time. And so my boys bring me a little paddle that I have. And then when they pull it away, I have to stop and can only sing again when they hand me it back. So that's what makes them laugh. Their Nana makes them laugh and makes them think about music and reads to them tons. So that is the beating of my heart. And so pleased to be here and start in that such good way, my friend Chris.
Thank I feel like she'd be a lovely grandmother, don't you? Jean, thank you so much. We're really looking forward to having you talk to us and help us learn more in this space. So I'm going to hand over to you, and we will have questions. There'll be an opportunity to ask Jean questions. If you're joining us online, you can do that in the chat. Otherwise, feel free to take some notes, jot down your question. We'll get some microphones around. Jean, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So I am so excited to be here. You know, I was born in Scotland. So to be speaking at St. Columba's School is pretty important to a Scot who had a lovely visit to Iona when I was living there. St. Columba did a lot of bringing faith to Scotland. But, you know, I'm also so very, very happy to be speaking to you today about some of the biological research that supports what you're doing in terms of deep learning. I have a degree in music and philosophy, but will be spending my time really talking to you about my passion, which is how the brain creates the reality and the experiences that we have with our children quite literally build the brain. And so when I think about new pedagogies for deep learning, and as Chris has said, and a big shout out to my friend Max and to my lovely friend Margot there from New Zealand. As Chris has said, I'm deeply involved with the new pedagogies team and Michael Fullen, because what I have recognized is that when we focus on developing these human competencies of the 6 C's in a relational context where the relationship between the child and the other children, the child and the teacher, educator, the child and the family, when we focus on these 6 competencies within the elements and all of those details I won't get into, kids and adults feel a deep sense of belonging. And when you have that deep, deep sense of belonging, then well-being is created. And so I want to invoke you today. Just sit back and listen. If you want the slides, you can have them afterwards. But I want to invoke in you this concept that if we focus on this way of thinking about education, then, as Chris said, all learners will flourish and contribute to the common good. And as Terry said, the future, bring it on. We have lived in a world, not only through COVID, but even before COVID, when the idea of what is education about has been driven by an industrial model. We have focused, both in your country and in my continent, we're focused on education as all about compliance and sorting and making kids compliant. And what have we learned? We've learned that that has been a struggle. Our kids have not done well in that situation. So I applaud the courage and the vision of you as parents and you as educators at St. Columba to say, you know, it's not good enough, the status quo. We want to make sure that we have learning that sticks, as Chris said, that sticks for life. I want to also just acknowledge, though, that we have been through a heck of a time with COVID, that the challenges that we've faced have been extreme. But I would love for you to think about the education that you're offering and joining in as parents collaboratively with the education system as being a huge big inoculation, a huge big jag, as we say in Scotland, an immunization against further difficulties. So I'm a child psychiatrist. That's how that's what I'm trained as. And I've spent many, many years as seeing families and children one-on-one. But one of my mentors said to me, Jean, we need to not be always in the middle of that rushing river with kids and families gushing by and we can only grab one or two. We are never going to be able to treat ourselves out of the mental health challenges that children and young people, the distress, the dismay, the disorder. We need to be upstream. We need to be upstream, preventing the problems from happening in the first place. We need to stop being the ones who are down. We need the people down at the bottom in the ambulances, but we need to spend more time up at the top of the cliff, preventing kids from falling over in the first place. And so what I can tell you as a scientist, as a deep, deep thinker about what do our children need to thrive and flourish, that your decision as an academic, a school community, to go forward on this deep learning journey is one that is an upstream move. It is so in line with what I understand, and so I'm in Canada, and our the indigenous people of our country believe, as I understand the Maori believe, and the indigenous people of Australia believe, that children are the heart of the nation, that they are the sacred ones, and that the role of education and parenting is to raise those children up well. It's not about having, I'll talk more about this, it's not about having them turn out to be the way you want them to be, you know, good kids, you know, graduate and do all of these things, but you want them not just to be good at that, you want them to be good at life and good citizens and have compassion for others. So thinking about children as the sacred ones has us think then that children who have special rights, I don't say special needs anymore, I say special rights. The Mohawk tradition is that children who come with special rights are here to tell us something, are here to educate us, to make us more human and humane. And my experience is, and I've learned lots from Max, and I've learned lots from Chris and from Margot, that when you have a philosophy that says we are going to see the best in children and the co-construction of learning with educators, then all children thrive. So what this means is that as we think about your Anglican education and my Catholic education and universal education, compassion needs to be at the heart of it. Love and compassion are not luxuries, they are necessities. Without them, we're not going to survive. And I am very deeply involved with MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, in compassionate systems awareness and seeing how we can marry deep learning and compassionate systems awareness and education. Because to me, this wonderful structure together is going to help us reestablish what is our North Star. What is it that we truly believe education is about? You know, here in Ontario, we have chased after the let's get the literacy rates up, important. Let's get the math rates up, important. Let's get the graduation rates up, very important. But we forgot about the well-being of children. So what is your North Star belief? So here's something, I'm just going to give you some provocations to think about. The Reggio Emilia approach from Italy with Loris Malaguzzi says that in education, we should have nothing without joy. As I hear, and you're going to see the little videos from Chris that have been created, you are going to see joyful, meaningful learning. Because at the heart of deep learning is engaging the world to change the world. Engage the world to know myself. So here I'm showing off. Uh-oh, you're not supposed to do that, my mom would say. But when I think about the joy of learning, I love this picture. This is 4 of my 8 grandchildren. The oldest is here, he's 6, reading with their Uncle Jojo. And look at that joy of learning and reading and being together. What are they learning? They are learning so much about social and emotional learning, as Chris talked about. They are learning so much about the skills that they're going to need for later on. But not only that, aren't they just freaking gorgeous? Aren't they just gorgeous? Look at those curls. Guess where they came from? But the joy of learning is what we need to be capturing. Particularly, I'll tell you that when we experience joy, I'm a brain geek. I'm not a neuroscientist, but I'm a brain geek. When we experience joy like my beauties are experiencing here, they are releasing neurotransmitters, little gorgeous chemicals in their brain that excite neurons, the major cell of the brain, and that is helping them learn. It is quieting their anxiety, it's quieting their fight or flight center, and it's activating their learning. I love this. This dopamine release, our neurotransmitter for reward, is hugely evident in that. You know, I'm such a geek that I'd love to measure their cortisol levels, but be nana. But you know, these are so crucial concepts that we think about creating the joy in education, the joy in parenting, the joy of being together, because we're living in VUCA times. We're living in times that are volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And guess what? They're not going away. No longer are the skills that we needed when I was growing up. I'm 68. They're not the skills that I learned, are not the ones that our children need now. They need to be able to collaborate. They need to be able to think critically about critical situations in order to be successful and to flourish and thrive. So we need to think about creating the conditions in education and at home as parents. I have 5 children of my own now with my 8 grandchildren. And so thinking about not just, let's create the conditions so they don't get sick. That's the old version 2.0. We really need to be thinking about how do we incorporate well-being and academic achievement in an integrated way that leads to flourishing. That it's not just the absence of illness that makes you well, it's about flourishing. And so that flourishing happens when you realize and recognize your own potential. As you learn to collaborate, as you learn to communicate, as you learn creative thinking, as you learn so many communication, all of these 6 C's, are helping young people and educators learn their potential. As they work with others to solve real life problems, engage the world to change the world, it helps them cope with stresses of life. They have a purpose, they have meaning, they can productively and fruitfully contribute to their community. So this is a voyage of well-being. In Canada, the First Nations people talk about a medicine wheel where there is a balance between the spiritual, physical, mental, and emotional. That we have a balance between them is what leads to well-being. In Canada, in America, in Britain, absolutely there has been what I've termed the tyranny of cognitive seduction. Isn't that a great term? I made it up. I made it up right on the spot when I was talking to a reporter. We have moved that lovely balance of all components being important to say, no, 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 no. What's really important in schooling is literacy, numeracy, graduation. And so we've said, I don't care so much about your prior learning. I care about what I'm teaching you now. Well, as I hear stories from Chris about what you're doing in your marvelous, marvelous education, I see that you are deeply thinking that it has to be education of the whole child. It has to be education of the whole family, the whole community, creating school as a community experience. Because that's what leads to well-being, having a sense of purpose, having hope, a sense of belonging, and having meaning in daily life. So crucial, this is our friend Michael Fullen, educating us with his deep, big, big brain, saying that if our kids are well, it's the key to a prosperous future. You know, the UNICEF Innocenti reports, a number of years ago, the UNICEF report said, the true measure of a nation is how well it looks after its young and its vulnerable, the aged. And I have to say that in many countries, we have not been doing a very good job. So we need to reform. We really need to rethink, as you are doing. We need to follow your lead, you at St. Columba. Here is an OECD report that says, what if at the end of high school, we didn't have that high stakes test that you have in Australia? Instead, we asked, show how you can work with others to combine and use your knowledge to create change that will generate better outcomes for people and the planet while doing what you consider to be the right thing. So that's the direction. I'm speaking with lots of leaders in education around the globe. And you're on track. You are so on track. But you know, you might say, oh, what have we done in the past? Oh my goodness. And I love this quote from Maya Angelou. It is my mantra, you know, progress, not perfection. But Maya Angelou says, let's learn. We do the best we can with what we know. And when we know better, we do better. So you are on this magnificent journey, looking at deep learning for your kids, for you as educators, because educators are deeply changed, engaging in deep learning with the competencies, with the 4 elements of learning, with the thinking about throughout the system. But I am fully engaged in deep learning because it focuses on all youth. All youth. There aren't some kids who aren't so great that we don't have to worry. This is all kids. This is focusing on what is the prior knowledge that you bring? How can we create a sense of belonging so that your identity as an Aboriginal child, as a Pacifica child, you bring in to our community of the classroom. So the 6 C's are so in line with what we know about how the brain learns and how the brain develops. So let me just spend, because I'm such a brain geek, let me spend just a little bit of time talking to you about this core principle. So when I think of the 6 C, when I think of new pedagogies for deep learning and the competencies and the relationships that the competencies create with the children, with each other, the children with the educators with the leadership and you as parents, all of you together. When I think about that, what I see in my freaky old brain here is that you're changing the brain. What we know now is different than when I graduated from medical school in 1981. What we now know is that the brain is way more malleable, way more changeable. And in fact, our genes don't determine how we turn out. And, you know, I had a great time when I was younger, when I did my first degree in music and philosophy. That's why I sing so much, Chris. When I did my first degree, we used to have these arguments. What's more important, nature or nurture? Is it the genes or is it the environment? And so now we had a great time, we know, but it was a waste of time, because what we now know is that the genes are in fact primed to listen to the environment. The experiences are turning on the neurons that you see there. Experiences come in through the senses up to the brain, and as they're repeated over and over again, they actually activate little tags on the genes to make connections. It's called epigenetics. Our brain is sculpted by the experiences that we have. Our brain is sculpted and created by the experiences that we have. So technically, there are neurons. The neurons talk to each other through synapses with little neurochemical transmitters like serotonin and dopamine. But what's key here is what gets played over and over and over again for kids wires up those magnificent pathways. The more we learn, the more dense those connections become, the more connections that we make. And so Dan Siegel, who is a big hero of mine, talks about the different parts of the brain. And this is really important. It's hugely important. I just, my husband Jim and I and my boy Jojo looked after our 5-year-old twins, 3-year-old and 1.5-year-old for the weekend. And this is so important that you understand how the brain develops. So Dan Siegel talks about the brain as being like in the palm of our hand. That when you think about the basic parts of the brain, the heartbeat, breathing, all of that stuff, that's like in this part of the brain, the palm of the hand. The next part to make connection and develop in the brain is what we call the limbic or the emotional system. So like, did we see lots of limbic system activity with our little 18-month-old? For sure. When he couldn't get his way, he didn't say, Nana, I'm upset that I'm not getting the same toy that my 3-year-old brother has. No, he would go, well, meow, down he goes. That was his limbic system. By the time he's 3, 4, 5, he's going to be able to have made the connections with this top part of his brain, the cortex, to the thinking part of the brain. So the brain develops from that bottom part through the middle up to the top. All the neurons are in place, but it's the activation of the connections that is happening over time. So what we know is that the brain develops from that lower function to a higher order of stopping, planning, and thinking. And it doesn't finish until 25 years of age, sometimes a whole lot later in kids. So what does that mean? It means as every emotion, every stimulus comes in, it comes in first to the bottom part of the brain here. And if that part of the brain is firing and wiring and going mad, or the limbic system, the next part of the brain is firing and wiring and going mad, you're never going to get to the top part of the planning, organizing, thinking, reasoning, reflecting brain. So kids flip their lid. What do we need to do as parents? You can never talk them out of it. What can we do as educators? You can never talk kids out of a downstairs meltdown. They're flipping their lid. First, you have to regulate. Once you regulate by your presence, by drumming, by singing, by connecting, then kids are able to relate, and only then are they able to reason. So what we need to be creating at home and at school is ways that this part of the brain is calm, so that learning and development can happen. That means they need to feel safe. They need to feel seen and understood. And that's why it's so important, as we look through an equity lens, that we think about the individual child. What do they know? What do they bring? What is the cultural context of their world? I love the work of Russell Bishop from New Zealand, who talks about relationships and interactions. Where are you on the relationship where the kids feel seen, where they feel safe, where they feel soothed? But it's not enough just to have great relationships in education. I love it. It is a sine qua non. You have to have it. But you also have to have amazing interaction through good pedagogical practice. So then kids feel safe, they feel seen, they feel soothed, and they feel secure. Why is it so amazingly important? It's because we are a social species. If we didn't have each other, we would shrivel up and die. Loneliness now is seen as big a health threat as obesity and smoking. Our brains are literally wired to connect. It's why I say to all of us as parents and grandparents, connect before you correct. Connect before you correct. Here is a picture of my older boy and my oldest grandson, Andrew and Liam. And what you see in that interaction is absolute joy. As their eyes light up, this is my dream, that every child will have at least one adult, preferably 5, whose eyes light up when they enter the room. When your eyes light up, what does it do? Remember, I'm a brain geek. What it does is, as the pupils dilate from the pleasure, it releases endorphins, it releases neurotransmitters that release other chemicals like Miracle-Gro, BDNF for the brain, and other neural pathways are connected, reinforced, and strengthened. First, we regulate through co-regulating, bringing our own calm. Then kids can relate, then they can reason. So now, does this mean that you have to go into hours and hours of psychotherapy, or, you know, take some special course? No, 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 no. What we know is that micro moments of connection are hugely important. That when kids are feeling stress, it's social connection that's a great buffer. We made a big mistake in public health, saying that we have to be socially distanced. No, 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 no. Through COVID, we needed to be physically distanced, but socially connected. Think about the micro moments that create, I love you, I see you, I hear you, you matter, that create the sense of belonging. And that sense of belonging is essential. It is a core requirement of humanity, a sense of belonging. So I love inquiry-based learning, because kids can bring in, through the 6 C's, through inquiry-based learning, they can bring in things that they're interested in. What are you interested in? Are you interested in dinosaurs? So my beauty is Liam, my oldest grandson, was getting a bit bored at school. So Did you know that the saber-toothed tiger is not called the saber-toothed tiger anymore? He did an independent project. Oh, now I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, he got to do in age 6 a project on one of his favorite is a dinosaur. Anyways, the saber-toothed tiger. He felt more connected around that, sharing that with his classmates, than he did in any of the other stupid drill and kill. But that's another story. He had a sense of belonging. He felt that he mattered and could belong. So, you know, the question I asked myself this, is, do kids feel that who they are as a learner is valued and appreciated in the context of the school? A dear friend of mine who is a high school educator, Peter Toth, talks about how he creates classrooms that are communities, that whatever your identity is, if whatever your identity is welcomed in this classroom. But you know, if we are only privileging certain kinds of knowledge, then we're leaving all of that prior knowledge, all of those other identities behind. What do we know from the research about bringing in identity, that sense of belonging? Is huge. It's huge, and we're so much more likely to have kids have that sense of belonging when we have a frame of competencies, and that we're examining the learning partnerships, the learning environments, how you're using all digital, all of those things. So a sense of belonging is crucial, not just at school, you know, but also at home. And that is, how do kids feel personally appreciated, validated, accepted, and treated fairly within an environment? And then the other part that we always need to think about is the reality that there is conditional belonging and belonging uncertainty. So when people feel they belong, they are not distracted, worried, or fearful about being treated as a stereotype and behaving in a way that reinforces stereotypes and negative perceptions. Are all young people, are all educators valued for who they are and what they do, so that they have a strong sense of belonging? So what do we know about the neuroscience of belonging? What the science shows us is that the same brain areas light up with social pain as light up with physical pain. That is how essential it is that children, we as adults, you as parents, feel a sense of belonging and welcoming and appreciated when you come into the school community. So, practical things to think about. Connect before you correct. So my boys are wildly running about, and, you know, we can do the old Scottish thing about, you know, okay, come here, sit down, enough. Never. But anyway, just pretend. Or we can ask them, as my daughter did. We were trying to, crazy idea, we were trying to get a picture of only, there were 7 grandchildren at the time, 5 and under, and I tried to get a picture of them all together, herding cats, easy peasy compared to this. But Tommy, he was 4.5 at the time, one of the twins, got up and started running. And my brilliant daughter said to him, as she's running after him, Tommy, what would make it easier for you to sit and be part of the picture? And he said, I'm looking for a stick, Mummy. They got a stick, he sat down, we got the picture. Holy moly, what a different frame of reference. Connect before you correct. As the kids are discombobulating, first you say, I see you're really excited and you're a bit upset to be leaving Nana and Papa's house? What would make it easier for you? Connect before you correct. So much of the time, though, as educators and parents, and me for sure, is spent directing and correcting. You know, 5 kids, 10 years apart, I was a major party pooper of their lives, trying to get here and there and do all the things. But think about, what is your connection to directing and correcting ratio? As you think about yourself as an educator or as a parent, what do you think about the importance of connection? Wonderful book by Alison Gopnik called The Carpenter or the Gardener. What's your view of your role as an educator and as a parent? Do you think that there is an end product that you want to have with the kids? And so they have to behave this way. If they don't behave this way, you time them out. You do all kinds of stuff that is that you take away your love from them. Or do you see yourself more as a gardener? And this is why I love deep learning, because it really is a philosophy, a framework that says children and educators are competent and capable, and our role in the system is create the conditions where all can thrive, where all can thrive. As I talked to Chris, the concept that the parents are competent and capable and contributors is palpable. That is thinking like a gardener. So just a little provocation. What do you want to do? Do you want to manage behavior, or do you want to guide behavior? Do you want children to get them to do what you want, or do you want to notice and listen what the child is trying to do and help them to be successful? If you're managing behavior, it is so stressful and tiring for both adults and children. Whereas if you're guiding behavior, you're thinking about offering resources and alternatives, language to help the skills develop. Why is this all so important? Well, I've spoken to the teachers before, and I mentioned to them that there's good evidence from emotional contagion theory that the teacher creates the weather in the classroom. As a mum, boy, oh boy, do I know that the parents create the weather in the home. But do we stop and think about that? Do we stop and think about what is the weather I'm creating? You know, there are times when you are going to have to correct kids because for safety reasons and other reasons. But here's a principle, it's actually from couples therapy with John Gottman. And that is, we need to be consciously thinking about depositing into the emotional piggy bank. I'm so happy to see you. How is your family doing? Did you get that new puppy? How is your baby brother? All of these, I care about you. How was school today? Do you know what I did at work today? This is what's exciting to me. All of these are deposits in the emotional piggy bank, so that when the weather is rough and tough, you don't bankrupt your relationship. You've got a nice fat cushion that's going to support having to do what might be hard. Now, you might think all of this is very good and it's good for the early years, but man, oh man, oh man, once these guys get into adolescence, it's another whole story. Well, let me tell you, the adolescent brain is also undergoing massive construction. We know this now. We used to think it was hormones. We used to think that the brain was kind of fixed. If you injured it, too bad, so sad. Now we know that the brain, and this is from neuroscience, that looking at the same kids every couple of years, they saw, oh my God, the brain is changing. The brain is changing in substantial ways. What we know is that what adolescents are busy engaging in and doing is what's building their brain. So if they're engaged in inquiry-based learning at school, thinking about how they can create a garden in a food desert, like those of us who were at the end, the deep learning lab saw in Anaheim, California. If they're engaged in those kind of activities and see how they're contributing to the community, it changes their brain. If they're in the basement playing Force this or that, or whatever the newest games are, that's what's building their brain. The brain doesn't develop evenly, though. The emotional part of the brain is developing ahead of the stop, plan, and think about it part of the brain. So our adolescents, and this is just a word for you, our adolescents, if they are cool and calm, that the top part of the brain is all fired up, they can solve any problem, any dilemma. If you want something complex to be solved, ask a bunch of teens. But if this emotional part is excited, if there's peers around exciting them, then there's a lack of connection. So here's a picture here. Adolescents, why do they do the things they do? So here's this guy. Does he know that it's dangerous to dive into an unknown body of water? He knows it's dangerous, but he thinks the thrill is even greater. He thinks the thrill of doing it with his little tricky friends behind him, and the thrill for all of those people on that boat that are going by is way worth more. The dopamine reward transmitter for that is way more important than the risk. How do I know? That's my boy. That's my kid. So what do we know that we need to do for our kids in the adolescent years? They need more of our time, not less of our time. We've been fed a bill of goods that the adolescent brain does not need adults. Sorry, I'm just plugging my laptop in because I'm getting a message. What we know is that the adolescent brain needs more of our connection. They need more meaningful learning. They need more positive parenting than at any other time. But we also know that the brain, when it is stressed, experiences firing of this limbic system and lack of connection up to the top. So we need to avoid this red box of toxic stress, because when we are perceiving threat or danger, we have a whole series of actions that go into place that turn on our amygdala, deepen our limbic system. It affects how our thinking happens. And what we hope is the fight or flight response goes down when the threat goes away. But what if you feel that the threat is there all the time? And I have to say that in many educational settings, particularly when we're thinking through an equity lens, kids are experiencing their amygdala, their fight or flight center being activated all the time. So if what we think affects how we feel, affects how we act, it means we really need to be examining our parenting style. This is true, and I've got some other slides for another time that parallels this knowledge about parenting behavior to add educational. So years and years of research show that there are different styles of parenting, and I'm telling you that they build the brain and build the relationship with kids. There's the do it my way because I said so, my way or the highway. There's the don't put the cat in the microwave, okay, honey, okay, honey. There's the parents who do not give a crapola about their kids. Where the sweet spot is this authoritative parenting, where there's positive relationship, where rules are clear and enforced. There's lots of love, but there's also lots of control. Just like in Russell Bishop's method, this would be called teaching to the Northeast, that there is lots of relational connection with the kids in school, but there's lots of expectation, high expectation, having children know what's expected of them. When kids have parents who are authoritative, the evidence is overwhelming that they do better. When you as parents are engaged with an educational community that is thinking through the lens of the 6 C's, that's looking at well-being and academic achievement as the double strand of the DNA, that the well-being is as important as the academic achievement. When you are welcomed into that as parents, then you are better able to see how positive parenting, positive relatedness makes such a difference. So here I want to finish. And I want to ask you, just a pondering, if you ask your child or your student, as you walk in the door, do you find home, do you find class to be more of a refuge or more of a stressor? Who you are is as important as what you do. And so we need to finish now, because I want to have room for questions and you on with the rest of your day and me the rest of my evening. But I want to invite you to think about, how is play incorporated into your daily life? Play is how we all learn best. We all learn best. I feel, therefore I learn. Are you finding ways to engage with children, with young people, so that they feel that they are heard, that they are seen? Are you thinking about educating the heart as well as the mind? So let's finish with this little video and then we'll open the floor.
When a child is born, we do everything we can to protect them, nurture them, love them. A child's heart and mind are fragile. As they grow, we want to teach them everything we know. We send them to school to fill their minds with wonderful knowledge, to give them the tools they need for life. At school, they get a taste of what things are like in the world outside. There is friendship, romance, disappointment, embarrassment, discrimination, and bullying. But are the tools we give them enough to prepare them for this world? We have an enormous responsibility and an amazing opportunity. If we truly want to prepare them for the world outside, we must also educate the heart. Because to navigate the world outside with compassion, acceptance, and tolerance, we need to teach them compassion, acceptance, and tolerance. This can begin in our schools, and it can start today. It can happen at hockey practice, dance class, at day camps, and music lessons. And it's already happening around the world with astonishing results. If we want our children to grow into socially and emotionally capable young people, we must ask for a balanced education that puts importance on educating both the mind and the heart.
So I want to finish there and say a huge thankful. I'm so grateful to have met Chris and to be part of the new pedagogies for deep learning. And I so hope that there's been some little soupçon of information or ideas that you want to delve into deeper, that you think, oh, that was cool, or oh, I wonder about that. So I'm hoping that it has provoked, as we say, those neurons firing. And so many, many, many thanks to you for this invitation. Over to you, Chris.
Yeah, Jean, you've given us so much. I might just give people 60 seconds just to collect their thoughts and perhaps think if there are any questions they would like to ask. Again, if you're on the on our Zoom, feel free to drop a question into the chat. I think we'll be able to see that there. And if you're on the floor, we'll get a microphone around. But just have a moment, think about what Jean shared, and we'll take some questions in just a moment. All right. I think we might have a first question.
We do. Oh, I feel like Jerry Springer. This is so exciting.
It might be down the front here.
Oh, it's down the front, right?
Jean, it's Alan. How are you?
I'm terrific, thank you. How are you, Alan?
Very well, thank you. Jean, I may be second guessing some minds in the room when I say I love the concept. I love the philosophy. I find it hard to apply some of that in a mass setting, in a classroom setting. Have you any thoughts on it? It's more than management. It's a philosophy. It's an ideology. It's a culture. Have you any thoughts on how to encourage that as a teacher of 28 children and then another 28 children?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I think that, Alan, is such an important question. I think the most important starting point is for you as an educator to stop and self-reflect. You know, I showed that slide very quickly about what we think affects how we feel, affects how we act. If you see yourself as a math teacher, as a deliverer of content, this is going to be tough. If you see yourself as a math teacher who is looking at observing how learners learn and how you learn about the learners learning, then you're in for gold. So for the very first step, I would say, is to really examine what is your view of the child and learner, and what is your view of yourself. So that's to me, that's the essential core. The other thing I would say to you, Alan, is look at diving deep into deep learning, because that book that was put together by the team has so many practical strategies about looking at yourself. First of all, where am I on this matrix? Where am I on this journey? How do I create these conditions for learning? So what you're hearing from me has a heck of a lot to do with you. You're also hearing from me, though, that you need to have the support of the leadership in the school to be able to be free to make mistakes, to be able to sort it out. My friend that I mentioned teaches entrepreneurship, management. So at the 9th, 10th, 11th grade. And what he does in terms of curricular expectations is he puts them up on the wall at the very beginning and says, how are we going to get there? Is what we decide as a classroom community. So there's some things that I would share with you to start. I know my friend Max is also on the Zoom, and I wonder, Max, if it's such an important question, if you invite you to share a thought or two if you're there. And that's allowed. Is that allowed, Chris?
Sure is, absolutely. The pressure's on, Max.
There he is. Hiya, Max.
Hi, Jean. It's been wonderful to listen to you and hear your thoughts again this morning. Alan, yeah, that is just a super powerful question. As teachers, we are wrapped in an environment that asks us to be so many things, and across so many environments. Jean has mentioned some of the work that we've done around designing deep learning and trying to pare that down to what really matters to produce the best learning experiences for all kids in all our classrooms. And so some of the essence of that work is paring down your design based on, as Jean has said, the positive, powerful relationships, the weather in the climate in the classroom that is conducive to recognizing all learners and what they bring. But then in our own design, we advocate looking at 4 elements that contribute to powerful, deep learning. The partnerships we engage in, the environment itself that we create, the culturally and contextually literate teaching and learning strategies, pedagogical practices that we engage with, and then also how we use technology. And when we try and pare down our design and focus on those 4, we're trying to minimize all of that noise that presents to us as teachers and build habits of becoming really precise around our learning design to meet the needs of those students who we know and recognize so well. It's challenging, but it's doable, as Chris has alluded to, with our partnership in its 10th year now. This work is grounded in practice from classrooms and practice that we know and has seen working. I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, Max.
Thanks, Max.
Are there any other questions? We've got a few. One up the back and one over on the side here. Bill.
Hi, Jane. Thanks for the presentation. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering, you talked a lot about joy and how important joy is in the classroom. And it's the reality that we often as teachers do have to deliver content, or in my case as a music teacher, I have to get students to do the hard work of learning the nuts and bolts of how to play their instrument, which can't always be joyous, before they get the reward of being able to play the song that they would like to play. So I'm just wondering, are there any hacks for children in terms of trying to create joy when there isn't necessarily joy in a particular activity, if that makes sense?
My goodness, boy, do I know this. So my degree is music education, and we had to learn one of the instruments of all of the orchestra. So I know what you're talking about as I'm trying to learn that frickin' violin, and oh my God, it was so painful. And so, I think we need to recognize that effort is required in learning, and that the small micro moments of acknowledging, wow, look where you have come since Monday and what you're doing. What are you finding is changing as you're practicing? Because in music and instruments, we have to practice over and over again. I'm avoiding picking up my guitar because I'm worried about the pain in my fingers. But I think in a relational context, to be able to share the micro moments of, look what you have mastered in this brief period of time. And it may just be that, you only squeaked that horrible noise 3 times in the past 4 minutes. But it is so important that we bring in a relational lens to what it is that's going on, and acknowledge the growth and support the effort to say, it's worth this. Who do you want to sound like? Who do you want to be like? And why is it worth playing in this kind of a way? So we know that the kind of prediction and having models for kids really helps them move along. I've worked, as Max knows, from New Pedagogies for Deep Learning, with the Newfoundland and Labrador English School Board, and they have created, as kids, through COVID, some absolutely amazing songs and products, and the joy of singing and creating together absolutely ignites the flame of connection and excitement. So recognize the effort, encourage it, give those micro moments of look where you've come, and foster that sense of mastery, autonomy, and purpose. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chris?
G'day there, Jean. It's Chris here. I started with the Acknowledgement of Country today. So firstly, thank you for also paying respect to First Nations learning around the world. I've just written down here, obviously, I think you'd recognise where in First Nations learning, the learner comes to the knowledge as and when the learner's ready, and usually never before, when knowledge is moving outwards and student moves inwards. So I'm wondering your thoughts on how does First Nations learning models fit into a space where we ask or require students to transition with their peers based on either age or stage, rather than a multifaceted cultural readiness?
Oh, great. Thanks, Chris. That's an easy one. Well, do you know what? I think that we need educational transformation. So the big picture is, I think we need educational transformation so that we stop this silly ranking and sorting and compliance by age in a way that is so colonial and non-respectful of Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and educating. So I think that has to be our big goal and drive to do that. In the interim, I think what's really important is that even within your structures, that you focus deeply and intently on a sense of belonging, a sense of connection, a sense that what their prior knowledge, what their lived experience is valued within the context of your classroom and the work. So it's you support that in spite of the form, the function, but you advocate very strongly. We know that structure affects behavior, but can you within that structure acknowledge the individual whole child characteristics and appreciate the gifts of each and every child at the same level, going for the big picture? Thank you.
We probably have time for one more question, if there is one. Yep, last one. Thank you, Nigel. We've got one more question for you, Jean.
Okay, great, Chris.
Check one. There we go. So I was just thinking about this authoritative approach in the teaching classroom, but then and how to enforce rules without this idea of punishment. So we kind of in the classroom saying you're continuing that behavior, we need to, not do that anymore. But yeah, I just don't know how to kind of bring the children back to the space of learning if they're licking the walls or a grape.
Okay,
I don't know.
Love it. Love it. What is on those walls that they want to lick? Oh, back in the olden days, it was lead. So a couple of thoughts I have on that. One is, I have seen in many, many situations that the rules of the classroom are switched on their head. And instead of rules of behavior, They become, how do we want to interact and create a safe space for learning for everyone? And it's more like the Indigenous perspective of creating agreements about how we are absolutely going to be together. And it makes a huge difference when the kids feel that they are contributing to what is to be experienced in the classroom. So that's one. The second is every behavior has a reason. Every behavior happens in a context and has meaning for that child. And so it becomes, and this is the work of the collaborative problem solving and self-reg, Stuart Shanker, and it really says that if there is behavior occurring, are we viewing it as misbehavior, or is there in fact stress underlying the behavior? So we look to see what are the conditions that are creating this behavior in the first place. Reframe it as stress behavior, examine, become a stress detective, see what it is. Is the emotional demand too great? Is the cognitive demand too great? Is there too much noise? All of those things. So you analyze. In the meantime, you stop the behavior. You absolutely, this is not saying, oh, I see you're so distressed and it's stress and not misbehavior and you're biting. Oh my goodness, you're biting again. Oh dear. No, you stop the behavior. Absolutely. You limit the behavior, but you become the detective to see where does this behavior come from, rather than just the rather than the old ABC of behaviorism. What we're understanding is so much more deeply that every behavior happens in a context. And you guys, I know if it's anything like North America, those behaviors are off the rockers since coming back from COVID. So focusing on creating a sense of belonging, a sense of stability, a sense of relationship and connection needs to be a top priority. So I hope that's helpful.
Jean, thank you so much. You've really brought home, I think, some ideas that we, in our hearts as educators, know, as parents we know, but sometimes it's easy to lose track of. I've got notes on my page here about belonging and social connection, about joy, connect before we correct. You've given us so much this morning, and you've made us laugh. And we're really, really grateful for that. But look, one thing I did take, Jean, and I think it's worth remembering as a parent and as an educator, that it's about progress and not perfection. And I think that's really helpful. So, Jean, we're going to give you a big round of applause all the way from Port Macquarie in Australia. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Jean. Thank you so much. And for those people that were joining us on the live stream, we're going to say goodbye, and we might cut that off now in a loving and joyful way.